She suddenly walked out of her family's life and never returned. No warning. Just silence that made her husband raise 4 children alone, haunted by questions that never had answers. But after 19 years, the truth behind her disappearance finally surfaced, and it was nothing like what her family expected. Stay with this story until the end, because it will challenge everything you believe about family, betrayal, and forgiveness. And before we begin, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We love seeing our community from all around the world. Malcolm Rivers never imagined his life would unravel in a single afternoon. He was a devoted father, a steady provider, and a husband deeply in love with his wife Evelyn. Their home in Charleston was modest, but it pulsed with warmth. 4 children filled the halls with their voices. Marcus, the eldest, already protective beyond his years. Alana, sharp-minded and determined. Isaiah, the dreamer who sketched in the margins of his notebooks. And little Naomi, who followed her mother everywhere she went. Evelyn was the center of their world, and Malcolm believed nothing could break the bond of their family. But on a cold December day in 2006, Evelyn went to the market and never came back. She didn't leave a note. She didn't answer her phone. When hours stretched into a night of panic, Malcolm called the police. Officers searched through marshlands, highways, and neighborhoods, but each day brought nothing but disappointment. The community held vigils. Neighbors whispered theories. Malcolm refused to give up, but after weeks of dead ends, the investigation stalled. To the world, Evelyn Rivers had vanished without a trace. The weight of her absence crushed the household. Marcus watched his father come home late from work, eyes rimmed red but determined not to show weakness. Alana, only in her teens, buried her grief in textbooks, trying to control what she could. Isaiah clung to hope, staring at the door each evening, waiting for the sound of his mother's keys. Naomi, barely out of diapers, tugged on her father's sleeve night after night, and asked the question he could never answer. "Daddy, when's Mama coming home?" Malcolm became both father and mother in a single breath. He packed school lunches, ironed uniforms, worked double shifts, and still found a way to sit in the bleachers at every recital, every game, every graduation. His hands were callous from labor, but his children never doubted his love. To neighbors, he was the portrait of resilience. But in the quiet of night, when exhaustion pressed heavy on his chest, he whispered. Into the silence, the only question that mattered. "Evelyn, where did you go?" The years passed, and the children grew, each shaped by the shadow of their mother's disappearance. Marcus hardened into a man who carried responsibility like armor, determined to never let his family fall apart again. Alana pursued her education fiercely, but resentment smoldered, anger at a mother who had abandoned them, and at a world that never gave answers. Isaiah held on to dreams, sketching portraits of the mother he barely remembered, believing that somehow, someday, she would return. And Naomi, the youngest, grew up almost motherless, piecing together Evelyn's face from faded photographs and fragments of stories told by her sibling. Through it all, Malcolm never remarried. Friends urged him to move on, to find companionship, but he only shook his head. "There's only one Evelyn," he would say. His love for her was not replaced, only reshaped by grief and endurance. By 2025, 19 years had passed. One by one, the children left home until only Naomi remained, her laughter keeping the house alive. But the day came when even she packed her bags for college. As Malcolm stood in the doorway waving goodbye, the silence that followed was unbearable. The home that once rang with voices now echoed only his footsteps. It was in that silence that something stirred in him. For the first time in almost 2 decades, he felt the weight of his own life pressing in. He had carried everyone else. Now, with the house empty, he faced the truth. He was alone. A local pastor noticed Malcolm's weariness and urged him to attend the Charleston Gullah Homecoming Festival, a celebration of food, music, and heritage along the waterfront. Malcolm resisted at first. Joy felt foreign to him, almost undeserved. But eventually, he agreed. Perhaps it was time to let the world remind him of life beyond grief. Malcolm did not know it yet, but that single choice, to step into the heart of his community, would lead him to the answers he had chased for 19 years and to a truth he never imagined possible. The Charleston Gullah Homecoming Festival stretched along the waterfront, alive with rhythm and color. Drums echoed across the cobblestones. Dancers spun in bright fabrics, and Food stalls filled the air with the fragrance of spices and seafood. Families laughed, children darted between stands, and music lifted into the evening sky. For many, it was a celebration. For Malcolm Rivers, it was unfamiliar ground, his first step toward joy after 19 years of silence. He moved slowly through the crowd, more observer than participant, until something stopped him cold. A smell drifted through the air, subtle at first, then undeniable, sweet, warm, laced with spice so distinct it pulled him backward through time. Malcolm's chest tightened. He inhaled again, his knees weakening under the weight of memory. It was Evelyn's pie. Not just any pie, her sweet potato spice pie, flavored with rare herbs her grandmother had carried into Gullah kitchens generations ago, a recipe Evelyn had promised never to give away. Malcolm had not tasted it, had not even smelled it, since the day she vanished. And yet, here it was, as vivid as if she were still in the kitchen of their Charleston home. His pulse quickened. He followed the scent through the throng of people, weaving past dancers and children, until he reached a modest bake stand tucked near the edge of the square. On the table sat pies cooling on wooden racks, their golden crusts glowing in the late afternoon light. Behind the counter, a young woman greeted him with a cheerful smile. "You look like you found something familiar," she said, noticing the way he stared. Malcolm swallowed hard. His voice was barely steady. Where did you learn to make this?" The girl tilted her head, puzzled by the urgency in his tone. Then, with an easy smile, she answered, "From the widow who lives by the marsh." The word struck him like a thunderclap. His heart pounded in his ears. He blinked, as if the phrase itself couldn't possibly be real. A widow. By the marsh. Malcolm pressed again, desperate for clarity, but the young woman hesitated. Her smile faltered. She wasn't comfortable giving details to a stranger. Panic clawed at him. He leaned closer, his voice breaking. "Please, I need to know." And then, for the first time in years, Malcolm told a stranger the story he had carried alone, of Evelyn, of her disappearance, of the 4 children left behind, and of his 19 years of unanswered grief. His words tumbled out, raw and trembling, until even the noise of the festival seemed to quiet around him. The young woman's eyes softened, her hands stilled on the counter. For a long moment, she simply studied him, as if weighing his pain. Then she lowered her voice. "If you truly seek her," she whispered, "follow the road past the tidal bend. At the edge of the marsh, you'll find her cabin." Malcolm's breath caught. The world seemed to tilt beneath him. He staggered back a step, clutching the edge of the stand for balance. Could it be possible? After 19 years of silence, was he about to find Evelyn? He whispered a shaky thank you and walked away, each step heavier than the last. That evening, the marshlands stretched before him as the sun sank low. The road narrowed into dirt, the sound of cicadas and frogs rising in the dusk. Reeds swayed on either side, bending like figures bowing to the wind. Malcolm gripped the steering wheel, his pulse drumming faster with every mile. At last he saw it, a weathered cabin, perched alone at the edge of the marsh. Its windows glowed faintly in the twilight. His hands shook on the wheel. Through the curtain of the front window, a shadow passed. His breath caught in his throat. The curtain shifted. A woman's face came into view. Evelyn. 19 years had passed, but there was no mistaking her. Their eyes locked across the distance, and in that moment, Malcolm's world collapsed into silence. She froze, staring back at him, then abruptly pulled the curtain shut. For a long moment, Malcolm sat frozen in his car, staring at the cabin where the curtain had just fallen shut. His chest rose and fell in jagged breaths. 19 years he had prayed, begged, and imagined this moment, and now he didn't know if his legs would carry him forward. He forced himself to the door, each step sinking into the damp earth. His hands trembled as he raised them to knock, but before he could, the door creaked open. Evelyn stood in the frame, the fading light painting shadows across her face. Her hair was streaked with silver now, her features older, but her eyes, those eyes he had memorized in photographs, were the same. For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. Then Malcolm's voice broke through, trembling and hoarse. "Evelyn?" Her lips parted, and a gasp escaped. Tears welled instantly as she reached for him. In an instant, they collapsed into each other's arms, clutching desperately as if to make up for the years lost. His shoulders shook with sobs he had buried for nearly 2 decades. Her hands gripped his back, holding on as though she feared he might disappear. When at last they pulled apart, Malcolm's eyes scanned the small cabin. Photographs lined the walls, pictures of a young man in his 20s, smiling in different stages of life. The images made Malcolm's chest tighten with confusion. He turned back to Evelyn, his voice unsteady. "Tell me why. Why did you leave us?" The color drained from her face. She sank onto a chair, her hands twisting in her lap. For a long while she said nothing, her breathing uneven, her eyes darting anywhere but his. Finally she whispered, "I made a mistake, a terrible mistake." Malcolm's fists clenched at his sides. His mind flooded with the faces of his children. Marcus carrying responsibility that wasn't his. Alana burying her pain. In anger, Isaiah sketching pictures of the mother he couldn't remember. Naomi asking questions that went unanswered. His voice sharpened. "They grew up without you, Evelyn. I raised them alone. What could possibly justify that?" Evelyn looked up then, her face streaked with tears. "I was pregnant, Malcolm. 19 years ago. I came here with you, and while you were sick in the cabin, I met someone. It was one night, but it changed everything. When we went home, I realized I was carrying his child. I was terrified. I couldn't bear to bring that shame on you, on the children, so I ran." The words slammed into Malcolm like a blow. He staggered back, his breath ragged. The photographs on the wall swam in his vision. That boy, grown now, was the reason Evelyn had disappeared. His heart raged with betrayal. For 19 years he had lived in torment, imagining his wife murdered, kidnapped, lost at sea. For 19 years his children had cried themselves to sleep, wondering why their mother never came home. And all along, she had been alive, raising another man's child. Yet beneath the fury, another truth churned. Relief. Relief that she wasn't buried in some unmarked grave. Relief that he could see her face, touch her hand, hear her voice again. Malcolm pressed his palms to his face, shaking. "You destroyed us, Evelyn," he whispered. "But I can't lie. Part of me is just glad you're still alive." Evelyn collapsed into sobs. "I've lived with this guilt every day. My son is grown now, living in Atlanta. And I am alone here. I don't expect forgiveness. But I couldn't face you. I couldn't face them." Malcolm looked at her for a long moment, his heart torn in two. Betrayal and love, anger and relief, grief and longing all collided inside him. Then, slowly, he reached for her hand. "Come home," he said. His voice cracked, but his grip was steady. "We'll face it together." Malcolm didn't tell the children right away. When he brought Evelyn back to Charleston, the weight of her presence in the house was almost too much for him to process alone. For days he sat at the kitchen table staring at her across from him, torn between relief and anger. He knew one thing for certain: he couldn't keep this secret from their children. For 19 years, silence had poisoned their family. He would not let silence shape their future again. One by one, he reached out to them. Marcus, the eldest, came first. He drove in from Columbia, his jaw set tight, suspicion heavy in his eyes. Alana arrived the next morning, cool and guarded, already bracing herself against disappointment. Isaiah hesitated for nearly a week before making the trip down, unsure if he could face the truth he had dreamed of all his life. And Naomi, away at her first semester of college, packed her bags as soon as she heard, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and fear. When they finally stood together in the family home, Malcolm's hands trembled. Evelyn sat silently in the living room, her shoulders hunched as if bracing for judgment. Malcolm cleared his throat, his voice breaking. "Your mother is alive," he said simply. Then, with trembling hands, he gestured for her to step forward. Evelyn appeared in the doorway, her face pale, her eyes glistening with tears. For a long moment, no one moved. The silence was so thick it felt like it might suffocate them all. Then the storm broke. Marcus's voice came first, harsh and cracking. 19 years. Do you know what that did to us? I raised them when you wouldn't. I carried everything you left behind. We didn't need you perfect. We just needed you here. And you weren't. His fury shook the room, his words heavy with the weight of stolen youth. Alana's bitterness followed, sharp as glass. You don't get to just walk back in. I stopped waiting for you a long time ago. Don't think I'm going to pretend this is some miracle reunion. Her words cut, but beneath them lay years of unspoken pain. Isaiah, who had said the least, finally stepped forward. His eyes were wide with both wonder and betrayal. All this time, I told myself you must have had a reason. I built stories in my head to make sense of it. And now you're here, and I don't know if your reason will ever be enough." His voice faltered, carrying the ache of a boy who had dreamed of his mother's return, only to face the truth of her absence. Naomi lingered near the back, her hands trembling. To her, Evelyn was barely more than a photograph, a faded presence in bedtime stories. Now, the woman was standing in front of her, flesh and blood. "I don't even know you," she whispered, "but I wished for you every birthday, every holiday, and now you're here, and I don't know whether to be happy or angry." Her words were simple, but they broke something in Evelyn's chest. Evelyn wept openly, her voice trembling as she spoke. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I missed everything that mattered. But I'm here because I can't carry the lie anymore. I don't expect you to embrace me, but I need you to know the truth. And if there is any way forward, I will spend the rest of my life trying to earn it." The room went still. The children's faces were etched with conflict, fury, sorrow, longing, and disbelief. Malcolm stood beside them, silent but steady, his presence holding the family together by sheer will. No one had forgiven. Not yet. But the words had been spoken, the truth laid bare. And in that silence, for the first time in 19 years, the possibility of healing flickered to life. The weeks that followed were anything but easy. The Rivers home, once silent with Malcolm's lonely footsteps, now throbbed with tension. Old wounds surfaced at every meal. Marcus could barely look at Evelyn without anger tightening his jaw. Alana's words cut like knives, her bitterness spilling out in sharp reminders of birthdays and milestones Evelyn had missed. Isaiah withdrew, sketching furiously in silence, his trust shaken. Naomi hovered between fascination and distance, wanting to know her mother but afraid to be hurt again. Malcolm bore it all with quiet endurance. He refused to force forgiveness, but he insisted on honesty. "We've lived with silence too long," he told them. "If we're going to survive this, we face it together." His steady voice kept the family anchored when tempers threatened to break them apart. Evelyn, for her part, did not run again. She cooked for them, using the same recipes that had once filled the house with comfort. She sat through Marcus's fury without answering back, through Alana's coldness without turning away. She sought Isaiah in his quiet moments, praising the art that revealed more of his heart than words ever could. And with Naomi, she listened, answering every hesitant question, piecing together the bonds stolen by time. Slowly, cracks began to appear in the wall of resentment. One evening, Isaiah pushed a sketchbook toward her. Inside was a drawing of the family dinner table, 5 figures, with a 6th chair empty. He looked at her and whispered, "I don't want that chair empty anymore." Evelyn wept as she pulled him into her arms. Marcus took longer. His anger was a shield, forged over 19 years of protecting his siblings. But late one night, Malcolm found him sitting on the porch, his hands covering his face. "I don't know how to stop being angry," Marcus admitted, his voice breaking. Malcolm placed a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to stop all at once. Just don't let anger be the only thing you feel." 6 months passed, and the Rivers home began to sound different. The laughter was cautious at first, then freer. The arguments still came, but they ended with conversations instead of silence. Evelyn had not erased the years she was gone. Nothing could, but she was present now, not hiding, not running. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, the family sat together around the dinner table. The same table where grief had once pressed so heavy now held something else. Hope. Evelyn placed her hand over Malcolm's, her eyes meeting his. Around them, their children leaned into each other, scarred, imperfect, but together. For 19 years, the Rivers family had lived in shadow. Now, though the scars would always remain, they were learning to live in the light again. Some wounds never fully heal, and some questions may never find simple answers. The Rivers family could not reclaim the 19 years that were lost, but they discovered that even after betrayal and silence, forgiveness can open a fragile path toward healing. Not a perfect ending, but the beginning of something new. But it leaves a question that lingers: if someone you loved disappeared for nearly 2 decades and returned with a hidden truth, could you forgive them? Or would the absence be too deep to ever mend? What would you do? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for staying with this story. If it moved you, don't stop here. This channel is filled with other powerful, true-to-life narratives of resilience, betrayal, hope, and second chances. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share with someone who believes in hope and healing. Until next time, may every broken silence lead to voices that heal.